and Sabrina today. I'm expecting more participants to be coming down for this webinar. Well, Cheryl and Sabrina, a very good morning to you. So Cheryl, I think your mic, yes, I'm getting more people coming on down to the webinar. So I'm just going to take one quick minute to introduce Mike. Well, Mike, you can introduce to the team.
Yes, hi, how are you doing, team? I'm actually, yeah, I see several participants here, Cheryl, Sabrina, so forth. I am Mike, and instructor I think I muted myself inadvertently there, but the subject we're looking at now is the project management professional training. So, DJ, did you want to start now, or you said you had a couple of more people you were expecting as well, or it's up to you?
Hey, Mike. Mike, yeah, Sean is also with me, so we can start the session.
Okay. Now, in terms of muting and unmuting the rest of the participants, DJ, just so I'm aware of the best way to do it. I see that we now have them all muted out, but at any given time, we can unmute any particular one. From what I see, and I just want to make sure my radar is going here, we have several, and so with this audience here, I want to maybe start a little bit with some engagement, but I'll allow a bit of an introduction of self. As I mentioned, Mike Crawley, I'm a project management professional. One of the designations I've been fortunate to have a bit of experience in, and as well as being certified and doing a lot of training, getting other people certified to reach such a goal. So what I see now is we have a couple, and I'd like to just get a bit of a feel, and if anyone else joins, I'll halt it, because the names that we have here now that are here at the start of the webinar are the ones I see. So I don't want to belabor it out a bit, but I see Sabrina. I see, I think that might be Sean. I see Cheryl. I see Richard. I see we also have a Nadine. So the names that I see here of where I started, I'm just grabbing my pen so I can jot them down. So if any other name appears, then I'm not going to have them do this same thing, which is just a brief introduction. So we'll stop that at Miss Nadine Pitts. I have Sabrina, S-A-B-R-I-N-A-B. It's easy enough to pronounce, of course. I believe that's our Sean, S-H-E-R-Y-L. Cheryl is, I believe it's pronounced Dinch. And Cheryl, when you become unmuted, you can let me know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not. I also have Richard Newborn, B-O-R-N, and I believe I'm getting that one correctly. So I think that should do the trick here as far as the names I'm not as familiar with. I have Nadine, Sabrina, Cheryl, and Richard. So for each of you, just give me a brief, 90-second spill of where you're from and what your bit of a background and your goals and expectations from a PMP training course. And I'll start with you, Nadine.
This is Nadine. I live in Pensacola, Florida. My background actually started out as an accountant, and then I moved into the IT area where I help people implement software changes. So that's kind of my project management professional experience. And it's just good to maintain industry standard technologies, because when you're dealing with different companies, you could be dealing with different levels of project managers.
Fantastic. I'll keep you on here for just a moment and to address the question of why PMP for you, Nadine.
As I was saying, it's just being familiar with the technology. It makes people, if you're talking terms of professional standards, as far as like a process goes, it makes people feel more comfortable with implementation of their software.
I can certainly see your motivation there. Fantastic, and welcome aboard, Nadine. We'll come down to Sabrina, and Sabrina B. I think I have that correct. Sometimes, depending on where you're from, the E's are pronounced differently. But Sabrina, let's have you up next. Did I unmute you? There you go, Sabrina.
Hi, sorry, I'm actually on a phone call at the moment.
Oh, let me come back to you. Did you want to finish that up?
Yes, please, sorry.
Go for it. So we'll come down the list here, and our next participant is, and I'm trying to slide my arrow down to bring it in. I'll go with Richard, I believe it's Mewborn. And Richard doesn't look like he has a microphone. Is that not correct? Richard, by the way, there is a chat. I mean, I wouldn't have Richard do his introduction by chat. It's a lot better if we are able to hear it. But there is, I don't know if you notice, a chat feature there. And did Richard just mic up? No mic for Richard. So let me drop down to Nusser. I think it's Nusser Iman. Not coming out for Nusser. Sabrina will come back to. Richard, no microphone. Nadine, we just did. Siobhan. Oh, unable to unmute Siobhan. Just a quick question for you, DJ. These mics that are unmutable, is that something that we should be able to control here from the hosting, or is there some other reason why those mics are not, I'm unable to mute them from here?
Well, you have the host mic. You can, unmute or mute them. That shouldn't be a problem. The only problem with Richard, I think he has not logged in through his computer, microphone. But you have all the rights to, mute and unmute them.
To add one more point, they can use the chat window as well. So in case they're not comfortable, in that case they can use the chat window. And whenever they have a questions, they can raise a hand, and they can shoot the questions through chat.
Hi, sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm Sabrina B. I actually work in a school district in Dobbs Ferry, and I'm looking to pick up more responsibilities in my current role that fit more of the project management title. And I believe getting professional management certification will help validate my taking more responsibilities and help me with my skills in the project management area and make me more marketable having that title under there. Sorry, I don't know what else was asked because I was hearing two voices at once when I was talking on the phone. So is there anything else I'm supposed to be telling you guys before we continue?
No, that's pretty much it. It's just an opportunity again to get a bit of a background of you and and what you have in mind as your goal for PMP. So that way we can maybe speak to that to some extent. So that's perfect.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. Now let me see if I can. So you're, how did that happen? Because my thing is showing you as muted. Can you still speak right now, Sabrina?
Oh,
Are
no,
you,
sorry. I was muting myself.
you muted yourself.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
great. All right, fantastic. Now that makes sense to me. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have Nadine, we have Sabrina. Is Nusar a student or Nusar one of the team members? Because I like to come down and have Nusar or Nusar, and feel free to unmute yourself because for some odd reason I'm not unable to unmute some of these. And to DJ's point, if it's easier, you're having a problem with the mic, feel free to just throw a quick note in the chat. But Nusar, you're up. And if nothing else, just raise your hand so I can make sure that at least we have some communication with you. Nusa, are you there? Okay. No communication there from Nusa, so I'm going to move on to the next one. Richard. I came to Richard one time, was unable to unmute him. Richard Mewborn, if and it looks like your mic is up, can you unmute yourself? Richard going once, going twice. Sean, I'm familiar with. Siobhan Mitchell. Okay, Siobhan Mitchell, is it easier to respond? And I have somebody in the chat. There you go. Siobhan Mitchell, I see you are already a project management analyst and you want to expand your knowledge and skills. Siobhan, where are you from? Not that that matters much, but it just interesting to know. Siobhan from Maryland. Okay, well, welcome aboard, Siobhan. Good to meet your acquaintance. And okay, so we'll go there. So that was kind of our starting point. Again, Mike Crawley, been doing IT. I come from an IT and leadership background. A lot of what I've been doing in the earlier stages, which were just a few years ago, of course, has been from the IT infrastructure, building out data centers, and that was really before the time when cloud computing had become popular. And everyone who was into IT or technology, every corporation had their own data center. And you had to have teams of people to manage every aspect of computing. And that ranged from this, what we call infrastructure part, over to the development, which is actually started, because everything obviously starts really with development, even the apps that we do that support the infrastructure, all those applications and all those back office applications to the admin, the whole client server thing and so forth. So really enjoy that infrastructure and that engineering part. So I really keep my arms around a lot of those type of engagements now. But what I was observing in those earlier stages was that many of the people who I was working with that were the project managers, for some odd reason, did not have a technology background. And that is because with project management, PMP, that it lends itself to being able to, it's a methodology that lends itself to being able to manage any type of project. So that is a pro and a con. In the IT space, the con is, of course, it really helps, or any space for that matter, any vertical. It really does help if you have some experience, some exposure to the vertical, so that as you're managing, you're able to speak to the vertical, because project management, while there is a structure, a construct, which I've heard being one of the reasons or one of the motivations for at least one of you considering the PMP as a practical next step. You're managing all of the resources, all of the moving parts. And the other thing that I saw here is that everyone on the call now, at least it was initially on when we went through, has some project management touch point. Sabrina, I'm not sure that if in your school district role, any of that entails any project management, and you may or may not be aware of that at the moment. But one of the purposes of navigating through this journey now is such that you can get a feel for what the project management piece may mean and how that might be able to kind of help take you to another level of thinking. When I originally went, and so I was motivated to do the PM because I found that a lot of times that the members of the team were being put into constraints and being asked to achieve goals or produce outcomes that in many times were not realistic. And it caused a lot of issues in the whole team management, and which result in productivity. And the underlying factor for me was clear in those instances that lack of the insight on the technology part meant that even though a person had some project management, and there was definitely some value to the project management piece, but there was something lacking. So I was inspired to pursue project management just because I've always been a person that liked to teach. I thought it from a teaching standpoint too, that even as a consultant who was able to understand this methodology, that in a sense, as you're guiding a team and you're managing resources, particularly the people resources, in a way you are mentoring, teaching, and instructing along the way when you have an opportunity. So I went on and pursued it. And from one say, it was a catch-22 in the beginning, and this was, I don't know, early 90s, mid-90s, when I formally began to really look at it as a study. Because what happens in the discipline of project management frequently is that your role changes. And so as an engineering person, a very hands-on person, my emphasis began to direct itself or redirect itself from the day-to-day hands-on capacity to the, managing the project. So that becomes really what you do. I'm going to divert here for a second just to show you something of my background, since we're at the introduction stage, and I did not embed it in the slide part, but I do have it in a in the body or a signature of an email. And the reason why is to kind of give you a bit of a feel for who I am in the scheme of this whole project management universe. I think I have it in here somewhere. But instead of flipping through all those, background is Microsoft MCSE, some Cisco work, PMP. It's been for about, 15 years now. Quite a bit of work and certifications in all of these areas I'm speaking to you about in data science, Agile, Scrum, Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma, etc. The list goes on with that. An MBA in IT and IT project management, MBA in learning and development. It's a master's of education in learning and development. So a couple of things go along with all of that territory, one of which is obviously a bit of an exposure to project management methodologies and framework. I'm a Scrum master and an Agile master. What's happened in recent time is even in the traditional project management, as you see here, there's integration of Agile. But what all of that means is that not only the ability to kind of to speak to the whole project management space, the PMP, which is what you're here for, but I've done a lot of certification and certification testing, including prepping students in the space of project management and PMP test prep. But I find that the whole methodology of testing and training in project management, the mindset, the psychology behind it, there's a science or an art and science to that alone. So whereas what you're looking at now is the lay of the land for project management or PMP certification itself, there's a thought process. And that's one of the reasons why I appreciate the aligning with the Ismart learning team. As you might imagine that over the years, I've in the training capacity and also being a hands-on consulting professional, I've had the honor, and excuse my voice here a bit, I was in Hawaii for some period of time, and I shifted weather. As a matter of fact, since December, I've been in the Caribbean, San Diego and Hawaii, all since December 20th. It's only just a few days ago that I've gotten back on the Midwest side. So there's been a bit of a transition from those more warm weathers, which Nadine, it sounds like you're still smack in the middle of. So kudos out there in Pensacola, unless you guys are having a cold wave out there too. Believe it or not, it actually snowed in Hawaii last week in Maui. And that's something that's unprecedented back over to this side. But hopefully I'm able coming across with enough clarity that you're still getting the idea here. But, you know, the Ismart team has an emphasis on not just necessarily getting content transmitted over to you and shoving it down your throat and saying, all right, you know, go for it, you're on your own, do the best you can. There is some emphasis or attention given to the fact that to understand in your, you know, who you are and what your learning style is. And the education component, that's been kind of an emphasis for me. When I did the education, my focus was on something called multiple intelligence learning theory, which factors in the reality that not everybody learns or assesses the same way. In other words, is able to reflect or demonstrate on what they've learned in the same way. People have different styles, and you try to, you know, consider that in the presentation, the delivery, and the user experience. Now that said, the PMP exam is a multiple choice examination. So, and there's a lot of information. So what you're looking at on the screen in this day-to-day breakdown, there is no getting around the fact that with the degree, the amount of information that you have and the amount of time that we have to cover it, that you would need to do some additional reading. Is anyone, and I would ask by a show of hands here, and it looks like I have some more feedback in the chat. Limited to 1 hour, DJ has said, so make sure we kind of keep the ball rolling. All right, so since we have just an hour, we'll go through. Now, DJ, you're familiar with the presentation that I have here. As an FYI, most of what we have in this presentation actually runs through a particular module. And there are 90 slides in the presentation that I have and that DJ is familiar with. I had an opportunity to speak with Sean yesterday, and you may be thinking that we'll go through the 90 slides, but we will not. There are only about 10 of these slides that we'll go through, simply because most of what's in this slide actually is a deep dive into a subject of project management. So now we get into the area of teaching a project management course, which I don't think is the intent of the overview session. But in the lay of the land here, you know, you've got the 4-day breakdown in this particular, what I want to call boot camp section of it. So day 1, you have the intro to PMP and what that is and means. And so that's pretty much what we'll look at covering, is this kind of day 1 overview of what PMP is all about, what the framework is for PMP, and possibly touch on the environment, but the role we'll certainly look at, and the project management processes and groups. When you get to the rest of it, you talk about the stakeholder management, you talk about the communication management, and this is just for your edification to know some of the things that are covered in the course, as well as what is PMP is comprised of. Scope management, schedule management, quality management. These are all the construct of project management and PMP itself. Day number 2, we hit the schedule, the scope, and the quality. Day number 3, the cost, resource, and procurement. Day 4, the risk integration, as well as the agile concepts. And as mentioned, being able to become certified in PMP is as much of a test-taking strategy as it is anything else. So you'll have to make sure that you're able to understand the psychology of the test taking. So the certification of project management has been around for quite a while. We're looking here at the trajectory of it and how it's played out in the industry. Even since the period of 1995, and as you can see, this chart takes us up to about 2000, that as a certification in the industry, it has gained quite a bit of traction over time. As a matter of fact, when you look at the top, I'll call it IT certifications of 2019, that's one chart to show you PMP. Well, you can pull up any chart, any demographic, and I'll come to this one. This is one of the well-known. As a matter of fact, when you look at some of the other lists, you'll see they reference the knowledge. And this is the 2019 list, which actually just came out. I've been looking for the 2019 list for some time and saw that there were some that came out at the end of 2018, but the 2019, this version is rather recent. Some of the top certifications that are out in IT, you may have heard of Cisco. CCNP is a very, very strong certification. It's been around for a long time. It falls all the way down on 15th on the list of the top 20 or top 15. Security and Net Plus, you've got Citrix, you've got Certified Ethical Hacker. From the backgrounds that I've heard on the phone here, I do a lot of cybersecurity training. As a matter of fact, something I'm heavy in the middle of right now. Many of these fall under cybersecurity, ethical hacking, the CISSP, which is a monster certification in cybersecurity. It's one of the elite standards in cyber. So many people really aspire to do that particular designation. You also have something called Certified Risk and Information Security. One of the things I want to point out, and I'll go back to this slide on PMP, let me do a previous, is that in addition to achieving an elite designation, and of course, PMP is right up here at the very top of all IT designations, each of the subcomponents of the PMP, we talked about stakeholder communication, scope, and so forth, stand on their own in terms of a subject matter body of knowledge. So as you take the journey toward PMP and PMP certification, and I like to emphasize this all the time so that you can be sure to smell the roses along the way, you may find a particular area of the project management journey that resonates with you more. And I would allow you to use the journey to make note of that. So yes, we're looking to get down here and be successful on the PMP exam itself. But you may find something that where you want to take a deeper dive once this training is over, and once you have successfully passed the exam, become certified, as an area of interest for yourself that you want to even interrogate further. Of particular attention, and what jumped out at me at that moment, was the risk management. But of course, communication, stakeholder, scope, quality, and so forth, all take on that same characteristic. So here we are with certified risk and information control being right here at the very top. You touch on here in the PMP. All of these touch on project management components. As a matter of fact, I teach quite a few of these subjects here, and there is a section on waterfall or traditional project management, which is what PMP tends to kind of align with. And on each of these exams, as well as Agile. So that is something that you'll have exposure to all of those, and you can find out along the way if those areas you're interested in. Again, security, the Microsoft and the cloud, all of these are cloud designations. Scrum is actually an Agile framework, which there are several of those. So again, as you look through your journey here, you see Agile as one of the concepts that's touched on throughout your journey. And then the PMP itself is considered the second, and this is all debatable, of course, because if you're not interested in cloud architecture, then you wouldn't go down that path anyway. PMP kind of aligns itself much like the Scrum Master certification, which where you're doing project management, and it's a way that you're navigating through projects, running projects, and managing your resources. And if that's your focal point, and what I've heard from the folks that are on this call that did the intro so far, that had a chance to speak, that's really the direction that you're looking to do, to take your subject matter expertise and the background and the experiences that you've been able to accumulate there, and to streamline it, to build on those, to complement them, to give yourself some more traction and value added in that space of leadership and managing resources and people. So that's exactly what we get to zoom on in here. So this is a lay of the land of what the PMP itself covers, and what the iCert breakdown is on a day-to-day basis. Let me pause here and ask if anyone has any questions about this overview so far. Any questions of any sort? And by the way, I'd like to make sure that we encourage the idea of interactive learning and feedback. So even though we have that amount of time, again, as I mentioned to DJ, in the presentation that I have in front of me, it actually gets into one of the sections of this project management area. So when I looked at it, I spoke to one of our other team members, Sean, and I mentioned to him that I would not be in 1 hour going through a 90-slide presentation on a particular area of course study. Instead, we would talk about the whole idea of the PMP certification, what that is about, what that entails, and kind of keep it more at a higher level and answer any questions that you may have as it relates to that journey, the Ismart approach to it, and of course the relevance to yourself, so you can contextualize it as the way to utilize this time. So any feedback or interaction you have is encouraged, not only for this introductory session, actually more so than as you take this deep dive, because when you begin to get in to these subjects, there'll be an opportunity to do some of that. But in that particular journey, there'll be a lot more kind of going through things, because at that point, you'd have to really be able to just understand that landscape And that would be what the focus of the attention is. So this slide, again, is to kind of give you an idea on the significance and the impact that PMP has had, and it takes us to 2016. But as mentioned, I think this 2019 representation takes that, amplifies the significance of the PMP even more heavily. Throughout the world, it is a global designation. PMI, the Project Management Institute, who sponsors this PMP, actually kind of created the idea, is a global organization. And the PMP designation itself has global implications. This little graph that shows you the demand of project managers by 2020 gives you an idea. I mean, these numbers are rather significant, but they may or may not mean a whole lot to you. They're not necessarily in relation to anything else. But the fact of the matter is you can see that this idea and this concept of PMP is taking traction all over the world, all over the world. So you're recognized with this designation no matter where you go. Many of you already have a bit of leadership exposure. It just takes you to the next level. Obviously, what that does is give you, the slide here says, shines in your resume. There's absolutely no question. I remember when I was decided to actually do the certification exam. When I initially was going through PMP exam, I had quite a bit of experience in IT infrastructure, and project management itself. So I see Sabrina says none here. Oh, that must be with response to the question. Okay, sorry about that, Sabrina. I'm just noticing your response there, but okay. So in my mind, I thought that because of my depth of experience, I mean, I had over 20 years of practical experience in companies like Motorola and Zurich Kemper and GE Capital and the IBMs and Microsofts, and the list goes on at that time. So I thought that, you know, there was really no need in getting another certification. Even at that time, I don't know, I had about 10 the industry's top certifications, and I've continued on that pace. I just kind of shifted the focus from the engineering emphasis. I still do that to this type of thing. There were some folks in my class, and I remember one gentleman in particular. He had 20 years of experience as a Motorola project manager. He had an MBA with concentration on project management. And Motorola had downsized. So he was in the job marketplace. They were actually paying for his training, his PMP training, because they had a transition program where they were giving their employees skills in other vertical areas to try to help equip them to go out and re-enter the workforce. And this is where I decided I would actually go and test out, instead of just sitting through a class for a few weeks and getting some really good information. He had been on a project and got called in for the last round of interviews, and thought he was very confident about it because of his years of experience, and Motorola is big on project management. So having the project management exposure at Motorola was especially significant. But he didn't get it. And he was able to have feedback during that post-interview process as to what went well with the interview and what could have been better. And they told him flat out that the only thing that he lacked, and the other candidates who moved forward, and that candidate who eventually did get the opportunity, was he did not have a PMP. So I thought that extremely significant, that here's a person with 20 years plus of practical, he was a project manager at Motorola,
had a master's, an MBA with a concentration on project management. And in all of that, they were looking to the PMP certification and designation to be more of a telling sign of the ability to operate in that capacity. Like I'm sure the experience helped him. But then a master's degree in project management, I think at the time it was, there were very few schools that were doing it. But either way, not many people had that designation at the time. So that was a trigger for me of the significance that the PMP designation has in the global marketplace. So when you say shine on the resume, that might be appealing to many. And I heard some of the participants who said, hey, yeah, we want to take this to another level. For me, that was not a big deal, the resume shiner. I was more interested in getting some substances I was going to be able to take with me and do a better job at what I did. So of course, with that comes the higher earnings. The PMI and PMP has local groups. So you have an opportunity to go to dinners and events and interact with other professionals. So the networking opportunities are phenomenal. The experience is what I got out of it, because through that networking, through the training, through the doors that opened along the way, there are just some opportunities that afforded itself that is no doubt the PMP track and designation, and let's just call it the fraternal order, was able to facilitate those opportunities. And the career growth potential is unspeakable. Again, when you look here, it is one of the top, a debatable 1 and 2 again. If you're not going in the cloud, then PMP is the top designation that you can have, right, for leadership. So moving forward in this, the framework of PMP, we already know, and this is all I've been speaking to, gives you the best practices for project management. And all of my years of experience that I had in PM, that gentleman that was in the class and many others, because at that time, it was a workforce development. There are a lot of people that were coming through that training that already had a significant amount of experience, myself included, in the infrastructure. The whole idea of the project management and the framework, the construct, the way of thinking that PMI offers is something that's a little bit different. It gives you a way of kind of approaching this that no other training offers. So I actually respected it a bit because, again, as a Cisco guru and a Microsoft guru, I was already very strong in certifications and letters and industry recognition. But as I navigated through the course and I began to understand that the way that the PMP was beginning to get me to look at how to manage projects in a very controlled and structured and methodical framework, above any of the other certifications that I had, even at that time, I said, this is one that I really want to grab onto. A lot of the industry certs, the Microsoft, you got to go back and re-up on them, and they change the technology, and they do this, that, and the other thing, and you're constantly chasing those certs to keep up on them. But when you're doing the project management PMP, you have a construct that, even though it changes, so for example, recently we went from version, a 5th edition PMBOK, which is the book that we use in project management. I'll touch on here in a minute, because in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to kind of navigate and dissect this why PMP certification a little bit better for you. But the basic construct remains. So the only thing that really happens in the PMP is that as these industry, the people go out into the space and they gain the industry experience globally, because you already see here that the PMP is something that's not just constrained to the United States, North American marketplace. This is a global designation. So at these conferences and meetings and workshops that PMPs worldwide are exchanging information and feedback, and the PMI is taking this all as inputs, as lessons learned, and so PMI is practicing the project management methodology in the kind of development and evolution of the PMP certification itself. So those lessons learned come back, and there's a slight adjustment, not every year, 4, 5, 6 year time frame to kind of modify PMP slightly to remain relevant to the demands and the communications of the global marketplace real time. So with this kind of approach and way of thinking and mindset, and I can speak to this personally, that of the many years of project management and IT project management experience that I had hands-on before doing the PMP, that when adopting the mindset, and make no mistake about it, there are things that we call PMI-isms. One of the biggest challenges that you're having in going through PMP, particularly if you already have some experience and exposure to project management, and this is the biggest thing that I have to kind of reinforce in all of the classes and all of the training, is that a lot of what you're bringing to the table, obviously that's great experience and keep it somewhere in the back of your brain, but there is a particular way or approach or construct that PMI has for framing and delivering and teaching project management. We call them PMI-isms, that you want to kind of put that way of thinking a little bit to the side so that you can understand the PMI approach to project management. And some places along the way it gets a little bumpy. You say, oh, why are you doing it that way? Why is it this and that? But resist the temptation and follow the roadmap of the PMI-isms so you can understand it and learn it from that construct, because trust me, at the end of the road, it comes together and it actually gives you a much better way of thinking about and approaching project management. But in the whole certification process, your success rate for your projects become a lot higher because of, and stronger, more organized, as the slide says, because you are beginning to really look at this matrix in a construct that gives it some shape and some form that you had not quite looked at before, minus having such a construct, such a framework. Your resource utilization becomes more optimized. And even though it says project cost there, cost is a resource to a certain extent. It's broken out separately here, minimizing resource utilization and making project cost efficient as two different things. But of course, you're managing resources, and resources have a cost. They go hand in hand as part of a triple constraint kind of thought. Changes the way others look at your ability. Absolutely no question that when you're approaching things from a structured approach, it becomes a lot more obvious the way that you're going about navigating the management of project and resources versus someone who might actually have some experience, but they don't have that way of thinking. It's definitely a way of thinking that you're becoming conditioned in, and it's a good positive one. Your job and promotion, obviously that could be a good thing depending on the environment that you're in, but there's absolutely no question that with PMP being one of the top designations, it'll take you down a path of becoming more marketable, even where you are in the marketplace. A couple of ways of looking at this. You're looking now at the contact hours. This speaks to the idea of getting yourself in a position to become in a position to take the exam. So the course that we're doing is in preparation of that. You're going to get the 35 contact hours. When you're putting together your package before PMI to say, hey, I'm prepared to take this exam, PMI, as part of their whole construct, says, well, let's see. You have to have some experience. You're not going to be able to come in here, get in the table, and just be an academic. You have to be able to demonstrate that you've done this. Everything that I've heard on the call from everyone, you've got some hours of project management experience. They need to break down into each of the domains. So there's a particular breakout that PMI has for how you document and log these experiences. But if you have a high school diploma, they're going to want you to have more hands-on experience. If you've got the bachelor's or above, the assumption is that you've gotten some of that throughout your academic journey. So they don't demand as much of the hands-on experience. You only need 4,500 hours versus not having a bachelor's, the 7,500 hours. So there's a whole process for them to validate that you've got those number of hours. You go online, you do the exam. They may randomly select the application for auditing if they see, and it's not that, oh, I see something in your app, I don't believe you. It's just a quality control process, and by doing it randomly, they keep it fair for everyone. And you'll go to a Prometric testing center in order to register for the exam. We're going to have the exam itself is 4 hours, 200 questions. You're graded on 175 of those. They're random. So you don't know what 25 of those questions are what we call pre-test questions. So you have to be careful about that. You have to tackle them all as if they're all live, hot questions. It's pass-fail. So even though they're, maybe a score, once you pass, you pass. They don't kind of say, oh, well, you got an A, so you're a better PMP than someone that got a C. It's not an A to C ranking. It's a numerical ranking. Believe it or not, it's in the low 600s on the scale of 1,000. And just to show you the challenge of the exam, the low 600 is what's necessary to pass. So they come out, the scale does kind of rate you in this way. So for example, if you're not successful on it, you'll know if you need to make improvement on the next go around, or even if you are successful, maybe you need to do better in a particular domain, or if you're, really above the target. Make sure you mark everything to our exam. There's no getting anything wrong. And it's broken down into these process groups, okay? So the process groups, it's a 5x9, 5 process groups, 5x10 rather, 10 knowledge areas. Every time you have a project, just like we're doing this course, you initiate it. You have to start the project off. You plan the project, you execute, monitor, and control, and then you close it. So this is what you call the 5, it's labeled performance domains. In the PMP, we call them process groups. And this breakdown is the percentage of emphasis for each of those process groups that's addressed throughout the exam and course. So as you can see, executing is 31%, the monitor and control 25, planning is 24. So those are the meat of it. But don't negate the initiation or the planning, because you have to make sure you're hitting all of them in an equitable fashion. I mentioned to you this concept of PMI isms. And again, this is I'll put a very strong emphasis on the PMI isms, because that is the difference between being successful on the PMP journey and even though you may come to the table, and this is particularly important for those who come to the table with project management experience, because there is a temptation to want to come in and insert your knowledge and your what you've done. And there's a lot of room for that. But this is a very specific approach to project management. Project managers are the center of the universe, and this is if you have a project type of organization. Of course, PMI would hope that you do. So the person with the skills of project management are the ones who are going to be more successful at being able to navigate that project across the threshold. The project manager puts the interest of the project first versus yourself, and that's exactly what this exam and the training is designed to do, is to put you in a position where you're able to operate from that perspective. You have situational questions. I like to tell everyone that in the project management exam construct, that when we go through and we teach the concepts of PMI, those sections that we laid out in that 4-day earlier, you're essentially getting the formulas. I don't know if any of you remember the days of taking math and algebra, but in algebra, you get a formula, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And you learn all of those formulas. But then I remember going to the exam, and I had all the formulas. It took me a while. I had to remember every single one of those things. And I'm not a math guru by any sense of the imagination. So that was enough work in and of itself. But when I got to the exam, the question said, John left the store at 2:00 p.m. traveling at 10 miles per hour, and Jane left at 3 traveling at 15 miles per hour. How long did it take before John and Jane were together? They met up. And so now I got a situational questions. A lot of times we call them word problems, but that's not the way that the course was delivered or taught. So there's an adjustment in the brain between getting the formulas, which of course you have to know the formulas to solve the problem. But when you're given a situation, which is a whole other competency, which is tying together, how do you take a scenario that you're given, and first of all, understand what it's asking. You receive notification that a major item you purchased for a project will be delayed. What is the best thing to do? Now, of course, you've been taught throughout the class that you should pre-plan your project, and we'll go into the various ways that you do it. Let the customer know and why stakeholder involvement and so forth are important. And at meeting with the team, communication and that type of thing are very important as well. Great. All of these things are what you should do. But according to the PMI and PMI-isms, there is a particular approach or framework to tackling those types of questions. So you want to review the PMP exam content first and foremost, enroll in a formal course of study, which is what Ismart is offering here to the audience today, where you can have that construct and that formal approach to the study, and begin to look at this from the PMI standpoint, what we call the PMI-isms. Develop a study plan, and even though we go through and kind of navigate you through with that 4-day layout, which hits all of the touch points that you need in order to be successful as far as having the formulas that you need for the exam. But we definitely want to make sure you have a study plan, because again, you have to digest the formulas. There's no getting around going into an exam and not understanding the formulas that are necessary to solve the problem. But the gap that needs to be bridged with the formal training and the study plan, and as you go through, reviewing the latest PMBOK, which is the 6th edition currently, is to be able to get your mind around understanding the formulas, but being able to contextualize them from the framework of getting a word problem and applying those formulas to solving the word problem. The PMI, PMBOK Body of Knowledge, is your Bible for that. We'll be going through that and aligning that very closely with the exam journey. Taking some practice questions is great. It's just like math. You got to practice, practice, practice. Form a study group, doesn't hurt. With us being remote, that might be something that would be a little more of a challenge to do, depending on how well you guys connect and interact with one another throughout the sessions that we have. You may decide to do something on the side to formulate your own study group. It's not a bad idea, but we'll certainly equip you with the resources that you can, if that's not going to be an optimal scenario for you, you'll be able to navigate the journey very well. So we've got the workshops that take you through. This is exactly where we start. This is one of the first lessons in project management. And this is what I was mentioning to DJ a moment ago, that once we get from this point forward, we're now teaching the course of project management. This is the very first lesson, the first day of project management. And so I'll leave you with this as we depart. What is a project? And this is a PMI-ism. A project is a temporary endeavor undertaking to produce a unique product or service. Now in this, there are some key words. This is the formula. One of the formulas we have to remember. We have to understand what a project is. Key points here: temporary, unique, product or service. Characteristics of a product or service of a project. It can be a product or service. Frequently, as you go through the project management ecosystem and training, where we're using the term project because it is project management, but at the end of the day, you're delivering something, right? So remember, we have the 5 steps where you initiate, you plan, you execute, you monitor and control, and you close. I won't go back to that. Let me stay here. So as you're going through that entire ecosystem, where you're trying to get is to the close phase. And you're using the tools of 49 processes, which are those 5 process groups: the initiate, planning, executing, monitoring, control, and closing. And there are 10 knowledge areas. And the combination of that matrix gets you to navigating through any project situation in a very successful way. So we're at our 1 hour stopping point. I want to pause here to make sure that we answer any questions that you may have about the PMI or PMP journey, Ismart, or whatever you may have at this juncture. So I'll pause, and then also Sean or DJ, if you have any comments, feel free. Any questions? Well, it seems to be a bit quiet. If you, do you guys what I would not mind doing, even though we've reached our 1 hour point, I would not mind taking another 5 minutes maybe to go through just some of the basic introductory concepts of this project management concept, so that those of you who came with the idea of wanting to maybe have a better grasp for, well, what is this PMP all about? I don't want to get into teaching a lecture at the time, but there are a couple of more of these slides that we can go in, and of course I'd like to show you the matrix, so that at least you can come away understanding the foundation of what the PMP is all about, which is this 49 process group, 49 processes, which are the 5 process groups, and the 10 knowledge areas. It's just another 5 minutes to just show you that. Is there anybody that is in a rush? And if so, what I'll do is I'll just do it, but I'll pause for any questions for anybody that might have anything burning at the moment while I pull up this knowledge area and process group, just to share it with those who may be interested. Any questions at the moment? This is the key. As you navigate, this is what the journey really entails. Every project, and this is what the beauty of this construct is. Again, when I initially decided to navigate formal training of project management, I had known enough about it to understand that by learning, getting the knowledge, it was going to help me manage projects better. So first and foremost is you develop a construct by which you navigate a project through. Initiate it. There are processes associated with this. How do you get a project started? How do you launch a project? Right? There's a way of doing it. There are certain documents that you utilize, and ways that you utilize those documents to get it started and allow it to flow through this initiation process in a certain way, and you move from that. You have to flow through it in a certain way before you move through to the next process group, which is planning. We all know what planning is. It's mapping out your journey. So if you're taking a journey from New York to California, you've never done it before. Of course, we have GPSs today, so this analogy is a little bit different than it may have been some time ago. But without a GPS, you hop in your car from wherever your point of origin is in New York, and you start driving. Well, we've initiated the project. We said, okay, we're going to drive from New York to California. But if you jump in the car and just start driving from New York to California, you might eventually make it. But you'd be a lot better off if you actually took a step before executing, which is the drive itself, if you actually sat there and you mapped out your trip. Because if you map out your trip, the planning phase, when you begin executing the drive from New York to California, your monitoring control will be a lot smoother, because at any point in time, you can see where you are, and you can ascertain whether or not, according to your plan, you're on track, off track, and even so, if you're ahead of schedule, or behind schedule, or on schedule, right? So it makes the idea of accomplishing this project that you've initiated, and your execution of the project toward the close, your arrival at your final destination, California. Once you get to California, we're done. Project over. Let's close it out. Of course, all stakeholders have to agree that we've reached a stopping point. But your ability to kind of flow from point A, initiating, to the deliverable, the close, becomes a lot more manageable. And your visibility to where you are at any given point in time is a lot more evident with that approach. So in the midst of that, and I'll close on this because I know we're going a little over, and I want to be respectful of the time of everyone that we have here, is you have your knowledge area. So at any given point in time, you're not going to navigate as simply as I just illustrated it, where you go directly from initiating, straight to planning, straight to executing. We're going to drive to California. Let's map it out. All right, let's start to drive. We got to stop and get gas. How far have we gotten? All right, we've gotten 200 miles so far. We have plenty more to go, and we have to go this way, that way, and the other way. I actually know that because we have a plan, and we can bump that up against the plan, which we're perpetually doing in an iterative manner. You're constantly iterating between these, and sometimes even between some of the documents you develop along the way. But anyway, at the end of the day, at some point in time, you realize that you actually arrived in California, and everybody can agree on that, and the mission is accomplished. But along that journey, we're bobbing and weaving in and out. You won't be able to see this whole thing on the screen all at once because it's such a complex system with the 49 processes and within the body of this. We have to become intimate with these 49 processes. That is what the entire journey of the PMP and the PMI approach to project management is all about. How do we manage navigating through these 49 processes? We talked about the process groups, but within the construct of these 10 knowledge areas, which you can't see that well, those of you who go on to the course journey will become very intimate with this entire ecosystem. And that is what the project management training is all about, is familiarizing you with navigating from the initiating to the close of the project in a PMI-centric fashion. I hope to see you all there. So with that, I'm finished my overview. At least there's some questions. I'll turn over to DJ or Sean to kind of close us out. Okay, I've just been informed that DJ and Sean are going to jump
hey,
in here.
hey, Mike.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Thanks. I was just, mesmerized with the conversation, and I was looking into the 10 knowledge areas, and I totally thank you for your time that you have dedicated to us today. And I hope, the people who are being a part of this webinar would have learned the real necessity of learning the project management professional certification. So with this, I give you the word of thanks that, you've been quite patient and have been like taking us through the whole journey. So thank you so much for your time. And I am just hoping that nobody has any questions. So I was just waiting for people to, jump into the questions, though I think it's been pretty explanatory that there is no question required. Well, so I just want to say thanks once again to everyone who's been a part of this webinar.
Yes, and I'd like to second that and thank each of you for your patience along the journey. And hopefully we have an opportunity to take the full ride together because it's a very interesting and deep dive. So it'll be wonderful to have the opportunity to navigate this with each of you.
Sure. Thank you so much, guys. You have a wonderful day ahead.
Okay, there's a couple of things here. I think these might be people saying thank you and goodbye. Fantastic. Thank you, Sabrina. And take care of yourself. I'm going to head out myself. All right. Thank you all. And we'll talk to you a little bit later.
Sure, Mike.
Take care.